Hello there and welcome back to the studio today. I really hope that you're having a wonderful day. In today's episode, we are going to continue this larger portrait painting that we started a couple days ago. So this layer is now dry and we're going to still continue the underpainting stage, but I think for today we're going to take it one step at a time and we're going to start to develop some of the areas around here. And on the palette here we have just titanium white, burnt umber, and Neo McGilt medium. And if you would like to know exactly what materials I'm using and or purchase the same type of materials, I have the materials listed in the description box down below along with their Amazon affiliate links. Just know that if you do click on one of those links, it will redirect you to the Amazon page where you can scroll through and look for the same materials that I have. Just know that if you do purchase one of those materials, Amazon will pay me a small amount, so thank you so much in advance if you decide to do that. So let's go ahead and mix up the value web. And if you've been watching the show long enough, you know that this is pretty much a standard thing that I do, not only just in the underpainting stage, but even when I'm starting to, get into the color layers. So we're just using the Neo McGilt medium to add a little more fluidity to the paint. Don't need that much though. Now we're going to start to move up the value scale and we're going to progressively add more and more titanium white. Do know that I would probably prefer to use flake white or I don't know, like some type of lead white, just because it would allow me to use more of it without raising the medium too much, thus allowing to have a thicker consistency of paint. But this works just fine, the titanium white and the burnt umber. We just need to use more paint to get a thicker consistency, that's all. Just a preference. Adding a little bit more, and it's really important to use bristle brushes or a palette knife to mix up your value web, just because bristle brushes can carry quite a lot of paint, and of course you know that palette knives can carry a ton of paint as well. Almost there, and I think that's going to be about it for the value web. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some smaller brushes. I'll designate one for the lighter values and one for the darker values, and I'll just take from there. So let's say that this brush will be our dark value brush. So we'll just start off with this one, this value here. And then from now on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move up and down the value range using just these two brushes. I may add a few more halftone brushes now and then. So this is going to be our designated light brush and our designated dark brush. And here we have an image of our model Madeline, and I'm going to keep a picture of her to the top left corner of your screen so you can refer to it as the painting develops. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pick an area to start. Usually I would start off with the forehead, but I'm feeling kind of ambitious today, so we're going to start off with the side plane of the eye socket. And I decided not to oil it out this time. Usually what I do is when I'm working over top of a dry layer of oil paint, I will add a little bit of my Neo McGilt medium over top of it. But instead, today, since this is such a thin layer, this is pretty much just a canvas with the, just odorless mineral spirits and burnt umber that I toned the canvas with last time. So since it's this thin, I don't really think that I need to oil it out. So now we're going to be subdividing the form. So we're going to start off with larger planes. So with this brush, I'm going to be looking for individual plane changes. And since I spent such a long time, figuring out these outlines over here, trying to figure out the placement of each feature with a very simple straight lines and angles, I'm just going to go in with a little more precision to these planes, And so how about we focus a lot more on the planes, more in the planes today. So for instance, each plane, like this one right here, is telling a story. And it's telling us a story of a specific angle that the plane is making with respect to a given light source. So now these planes are darker, right? So they're telling us that they are angling away from the light source, meaning that they're closer to parallel than perpendicular to the light source. And now here we are going in with the lighter brush. And I'm not trying to paint so thick. I'm just painting very, very light. I don't know, I just kind of want it to be a kind of soft texture. You do want to think about the texture of the painting, especially if you're going to be using the classical approach in layering in this way. If I wanted to have a thicker painting, a thicker underpainting, I'd be using bristles and probably a lead white, like a flake white, or some kind of lead white, but instead just titanium white, and these synthetics will do just fine. So now you can observe that the eye socket is starting to look pretty dimensional in a very, very basic fashion, very simplistic, and that's the kind of control that I want to have with this underpainting. And you know that I've done more loose underpaintings. I think the last larger painting that we started, that we're still working on, that one, I started off with a much looser underpainting. You know, and it's just how you're feeling on that given day. You know, if you want to start looser, you can. If you want to have a much more, refined shape like this, you can. It's all down to how you're feeling that day. So now as we turn along the side of the eye socket, it is going to get darker. Now I'm going to label this as large plane modeling, even though that these are smaller planes, okay? I'm still thinking about the big picture. You know, the way that you can work in one little segment like this and still keep an idea of the big picture is to be very mindful of your values. Remember, values just meaning light and dark. And I'm going to purposefully now at this point actually push the lighter planes a little bit brighter. So this right here is pretty much, no, never mind. Let's see how bright we can go, okay? I'm going to put just titanium white and a little bit of neo medium to the brush. Let's see how light we can go. That's pretty light. We can still go very, very light. So in the underpainting, what you're after is the simple patterns of light and dark. So I am prioritizing, the patterns, the simple patterns of light and shadow. I am, but I'm now starting to add in much more sophistication to the individual values. Although I want to keep in mind the arrangement of the big picture. I'm going to share a little story with you. Painting and talking at the same time is really an art form unto itself. You know, I really think that artists such as Bob Ross were masters in the art of painting and talking at the same time. And it really takes a long time. It took me a long time, and it's still taking me a long time to, get acclimated to that kind of thought process, that kind of multitasking. And I think that for me, what I'm trying to do for you every single day, is present you with the experience, okay? I know I say that a lot, but I'm also giving you my thought process. So imagine, you're painting and you've got a lot of thoughts going on in your head. You're thinking, well, is this plane darker? Is this one darker than this one? You may be thinking about your cats. You may be thinking about your dogs or something like that. You know that the train of thought doesn't always have to be, exactly procedural. So sometimes I'll go on a tangent like I just did and talk about something that's kind of related to what I'm feeling and thinking at the same time, and still kind of relate it to painting. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about painting as I'm painting. So I'm thinking about the entire structure of that eye socket. I'm thinking about the value range. I'm thinking that I might be in trouble with this light. So I'm actually going to purposefully push the light even brighter in this section. And this is because, you know, what I usually say is go lighter than you think you need to with the underpainting. Here we're going to put in the color for the sclera. And you want to go lighter and softer with your underpainting, because as you develop more and more layers, you'll find it's actually a little easier to sharpen and darken as you move up in the number of layers that you use. And I gotta be careful not to stay in one area for that long. I know it's probably been about 8 minutes that I've been on this eye. But we've got a lot done, you know, for 8 minutes on the eye. I am kind of a little slower moving, you know, when I'm painting and talking, but yeah, I'm trying to bring you into the process. You really mean a lot to me, that you're sitting there listening to me. It really means the world to me. Now we're starting to put in this bottom plane. This is the bottom plane of the lower eyelid. So again, large planes. I'm prioritizing the large planes, even though I am using smaller shapes. You know, thinking about how this entire eye is fitting. You know, is it the right width? It looks about good. And now there's going to be more light over here as we approach the top plane of the tear duct. And then there's going to be a side plane over here. Smaller shapes, I know. But it's all relating to the big picture, nonetheless. Side plane over here. Okay, and now we're going to put in a little bit of a darker halftone around here. Lighter over here. And now as we move across there, we're going to start to reach more and more light. Now the tendency for me would be to stick in this area, you know, and try to make it as perfect as possible. But that would be considered closing up the form. And closing up the form right now is kind of an optional thing. I'm leaving it optional. A little bit lighter there. Okay, now let's go ahead and move on to this shape here. So this is the glabella. All right, and now we're going to move to the top plane of the glabella right over here. So this is a highlight for the plane of the nasal bone. Nasal bone is somewhere over here, and that's why that area is reaching the light. And it's closer to being perpendicular to the light source. So that's why it's receiving so much light. All right. So now I'm just going to continue to add a few more planes here. All right, so I'm thinking since I'm putting this much attention to this one eye, I better darn be sure that it's the right distance away from the other eye. So ideally, if the model was facing us, the distance between the eyes is the length of one eye if the model is facing us, right? But the model is turned in 3/4, so we should be seeing a little less of this eye. Just a little though. And yeah, we're fine. We're good. So now I'm going to start to add the halftone over here. go. Getting a little bit darker there. All right, and now I have to think conceptually because all of these values are pretty flat on the photo reference, and it's just the nature of the photograph. So it looks to me that this plane here should be facing the light a little bit more than this one. So even though the photograph is kind of flattening the entire area out, I am going to say, hey, I think this area is facing the light more. Just given the plane in space. Okay, so now I'm faced with a little dilemma. What I'm going to do is clean off the dark brush a little bit off camera with the odorless mineral spirits. Now I'm going to put in this darker value. I probably should have had a different brush for this, but I think we'll be okay. So while I'm putting in this dark value, I should probably put it on the other side too. And when you're spending this much time on individual shapes, beware of frontal izing. So frontal izing is when you try to bring an eye towards you that's facing away from you, or like the nose, trying to bring the nose towards you just because it makes us more comfortable. So I'm being very cautious of that. I'm thinking about the turn that the eye is making relative to me and maintaining that. So that means that I'm seeing more of this side of the sclera right here than that side of the sclera. But just know that with the underpainting, you're allowed to make mistakes. With the underpainting, you're really trying to reason with the shapes. Darker over there. Now with the light brush, I'm going to start to put in the planes for the lower eyelid. Still thinking about the big picture. So I'm thinking about the tear duct here, right? So it's being cut off a little bit by the light of the nose. Right here, this is what I mean. So the corner of the tear duct is being cut off by the nose a little bit with respect to us. Okay. Now a little more light up here. And some halftones over here. Okay. And it's going to be a little bit darker right here. This is the accent mark. So this is where one form meets another form. So the planes for the eye socket here turning inwards, blocking all the light as it turns into the upper eyelid. And I admit I am going to spend much more time, or I have spent, I should say now, much more time on the eyes than any of the other features. Just because the eyes, so this angle, I'm pretty confident with this angle. Though, watch me say that, and then, like, when it comes time to editing this, I'll be like, no, the angles are all off. But I'm pretty sure at this point right now that these angles they're good. And this doesn't even begin to get the specificity that I will eventually have when we move into the color stages, okay? Alright, so now pushing more light up here. I'm not going to worry about the eyebrows too much. Now we're going to venture off towards the nose. And so for the nose, I'm going to start off with these darker planes. So one over here. the side plane of the nose. I really want to think about the turn that the model is making relative to us. So see right there, I was about to frontalize, which is a no-no. That is not what I want to do. So I really want the turn of the nose. I have to pay very close attention to this shape. Turning over here. I have a feeling that this part of the underpainting is going to take a long time. So depending on the footage, I may split this into two episodes. We'll see. Just so I don't overwhelm you or bore you with too much footage. The dark for the nose. But honestly, this is I think one of the most educational parts of the underpainting. You know, just seeing how I'm going into individual planes. And even though they're smaller planes, you're seeing that I'm, you know, maintaining the larger planes, or the relation between the larger planes. Now this does take quite a bit of focus, so I may not talk as much. So forgive me if I go silent for a little while. I'm just looking at the characteristic of the bulb of the nose right now. So our model's nose is much more sharp than mine, much more angular, whereas mine is more round. So the tendency, other than Frontal Izing, is to also paint yourself. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, I definitely don't want to impose my likeness onto the painting. So I'm very careful not to make the nose too round, especially the bulb of the nose. So I want to make sure that this plane is very clear, very evident, and not overly round. I really do enjoy the consistency of the Neo McGilt medium. Remember when I was mixing up the value web, you saw me use quite a lot of the medium. Though, I mean, I don't use too much, right? It's not like, you know, dripping off the canvas. And ideally, you want to use less medium in the underpainting stage, according to the fat over lean principle, which states that you want to use more medium as you increase the number of layers. But anyway, that leads me to question of the day. What's your favorite medium to use? Do you like to use fast dryers, slow dryers, or maybe you don't use any medium at all? So I'm definitely pushing the sharpness of the bulb of the nose here. And then here's another thing that's usually kind of delicate. The corner of the nose here, you know, if you make it like that, like if you make it too sharp of a line, then that usually it doesn't look good in terms of aesthetics. So rather just make it a simple plane, maybe here. This can kind of disappear and then sharper over there. Very simple. So now that we have those basic planes for the nose, we can approach the mouth. Just looking at this value. All right, so for the mouth, I'm thinking of the distance of the philtrum. So from here to about here, this is the philtrum. And it looks fine to me. Don't really have too much of a problem with that, which rarely happens. I usually don't get the proportions right away. But this time I think I did. Huh. Strange. And we're pushing more light here. Okay, so I'm literally thinking about the distance from the bottom of the root of the nose to here. And I thought that I had it just right, but I don't think I do. I really don't. Let's double check this. So from the forehead to the eyebrow is a third, right? So our model's nose is pretty close to a third, just a little bit lower. The chin is just a little bit lower. So we're good with the major thirds of the face. So I think that means that I need to move the upper lip up a little bit. And that's why I usually actually start with the upper lip. So I'm going to move that shape up. I'm going to be cautious not to frontalize. Beware frontalizing. And I'm just telling you this because I've frontalized so many times. I've messed that up so many times. It's natural, okay? If that happens to you a lot, just know it happens to me too. Alright, so moving that up, and I'm trying to make sure that we maintain the positioning of the mouth. Let's move it up a little bit more. We measured where the mouth, or the bottom of the nose goes. Nose goes. Have you ever played that game, Nose Goes? But anyway, we found out where the bottom of the nose is supposed to go, and right here is about good. So that meant that the mouth needed to go up a little bit, just so the philtrum isn't too long. And I'm also making a lot of these decisions by standing back. Standing back helps you see with more objectivity, I think. Now we're going to have a lighter plane here, though still a little bit darker. And now switching to the lighter brush. I have a lighter shape here, darker shape here, and I'm not going to render the lips out too much. I'm going to leave that be. Because you know that the lips are just things that move a lot. So I'm not going to try to get a perfect positioning on it and leave it there. Not going to do that at all. Alright, so that's all I'm going to put for the lips. And now we have the bottom plane here, or the orbicularis oris. Bottom of the orbicularis oris goes there. Got a little bit of a value dilemma. This should be darker than this. What's going on there? I'm going to make this darker. Darker underneath here. That's a little better. Now I'm going to relate this side of the mouth to the side of the nose, and it's about like so. And you can see how, you know, even though we're putting in values, we're still, you know, perfecting the drawing. And now what we're going to do is with larger brushes, we're going to start to put in the larger structures of the face. And I'm aware that I've spent a long time on the features. So I'm going to make this one go a little faster for you. So I have a light brush and a dark brush. I don't think I'm going to be showing every step of this stage, just because then I will have to split this video up into even more sections. I think we're still good at sticking with one episode for this, but we'll see. Alright, so what I'm doing now is with a larger brush, I'm looking at the larger planes in a much more simplistic fashion. So right here, this plane is turning away from the light a little bit, but not too much, okay? Gotta be cautious with that. And if I make it too dark, then it's going to look like, you know, we punched our model in the face. So we got to be careful with that. Lighter plane over here. So now that's how we're going to do it. So we're going to relate each little plane to one another. So this is probably the light most facing plane. And the light source is very soft. So that means that the tones are going to be much more compressed. A little bit darker over here. So the light is not very sharp, so we're not using like a really bright halogen light. This is very soft, almost like a daylight type light. It's actually going to get darker around here. And this is why it's so important to have that value web on your palette. It's because you can move very quickly. So it's going to actually be darker here. Then it's going to lighten up a little bit over here. Just because this plane is facing the light a lot less. And we're going to lighten up as we move towards here. And it's important to look at these planes, okay? Without these planes, we would just have a generic round shape for the face. That's not what we want. It's going to get lighter over here. And there's going to be another transitioning plane in between the side plane of the nose and the maxilla region over here. Okay. A transitioning plane right there. Lighter value over here, since this plane is facing the light even more than all of these. And it's going to get slightly darker. So we move across. We're going to soften this a little bit. So now I think that's pretty good for, you know, showing you how I'm approaching these planes. So now what I'm going to do is apply the same kind of reasoning all throughout here. Now, after spending quite some time picking and choosing which planes to, you know, lighten and darken with respect to the relative angle that the plane has to the light source, I think that we now have covered pretty much all that we need to cover for the face, for the underpainting stage. Just one last thing I'm going to do. I'm just going to soften some of these edges, especially over here around the nose. And I'm just using a clean and dry synthetic brush. And with the underpainting stage, you really want to, you know, like I keep saying, make it softer and lighter. So as you can see, these values are pretty light. And now I'm just softening. Even over here, like a chop like that, I wouldn't want to leave. And softening over here. And maybe over here, although I should probably use a fan brush for this. So I did kind of outline all around here and all down here to try to get the boundary for the hair. I mean, I guess I could leave that line, but let's see if I can just soften it a little bit. Very gently. Now it has been quite a while today, so the paint is actually starting to get tacky, which is something that I'm used to. You know, especially with a fast drying medium, the Neo McGilp medium, the paint will start to, you know, get tacky after a while. Which is a good thing because it's a sign that this will be dry relatively soon. And let's soften over here too. I think that ought to be good. That being said, I really do hope that today's video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and as always remember that in a world that can be so negative, be the spark that ignites positivity amongst all of us. I really do hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.